What happens when a single spoonful of stew unlocks a memory buried for 30 years? For Andrew Gates, a billionaire who could buy anything except the ability to taste, dinner at Chicago's most exclusive restaurant was just another business obligation. But one dish, a dish not even on the menu, stopped him cold. It tasted of something impossible. His mother's kitchen, her laughter, a love he thought was lost forever. Shaken to his core, he demanded to know who created it. Everyone expected Vantage's celebrity chef to step forward. Instead, the answer came from a trembling waitress in a blue uniform, clutching her chest in nervous terror. What she revealed would shatter the illusion of culinary genius and resurrect a legacy that connected two families across decades. Vantage wasn't just a restaurant. It was a declaration, perched on the 95th floor of Chicago's Hancock Center. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that made the city below look like scattered jewels on black velvet. Inside, the decor whispered wealth. Tables of polished ebony, chairs upholstered in pearl-white leather, and a single dramatic crystal chandelier that cast light like fractured diamonds. The soft clink of silver on bone china created a delicate symphony, punctuated by the hushed, self-important murmurs of Chicago's elite. For Kate Thompson, it was just another grueling shift. At 26, her life existed in a different universe from the patron she served. Her reality was a cramped Logan Square walk-up, a mountain of medical bills for her younger brother David, and the gnawing anxiety that came with barely surviving. Kate moved through Vantage with practiced invisibility, refilling water glasses before they emptied, clearing plates with whisper-quiet grace, anticipating needs before they were spoken. Her manager Peter called her reliable. Chef Daniel Alberto, the insufferably arrogant head chef, called her wallpaper. Both were accurate. But beneath the starched blue uniform, with its white, lace-trimmed apron, was a fire. It was a legacy inherited from her grandmother Joanna, a woman who could transform humble ingredients into magic in a cast-iron pot. Kate's hands, though calloused from carrying trays, remembered the rhythm of kneading dough, the precision of chopping herbs, the patient art of coaxing flavors from simple mountain fare. Her grandmother's leather-bound recipe book, its pages worn soft with age and stained with history, was her most treasured possession, a Bible of Blue Ridge wisdom written in rosemary, thyme, and wild honey. Tonight, the tension at Vantage was suffocating. The reason sat at table one with the most commanding view, Andrew Gates. He wasn't just wealthy, he was a titan, the founder of Gates Nexus. His name was whispered with equal parts awe and fear in boardrooms worldwide. His face, sharp and handsome, was carved with permanent impatience, as if the world moved too slowly for his brilliance. He dined with two associates, their conversation a low rumble about mergers worth more than Kate would earn in 10 lifetimes. Kate was assigned to their section. Her heart hammered. A generous tip could mean paying rent without dipping into David's medication fund. A complaint could mean losing everything. "Good evening, Mr. Gates," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coiling in her stomach. "May I start you with something to drink?" Andrew Gates didn't look at her. He gestured dismissively with a hand wearing a watch that cost more than her car. "Sparkling water. 3 glasses. And tell Chef Liberto I'm not interested in his molecular circus tonight. I want something real, something with soul." He paused, his gray eyes cold. See if he's capable of that. The insult landed with casual cruelty. Kate felt anger flash hot in her chest. She knew exactly what he meant by soul, and she knew Daniel was constitutionally incapable of providing it. She nodded politely, her professional mask firmly in place. As she retreated to the kitchen and relayed the message, Chef Daniel's face contorted with indignation. "Soul," he sneered, his accent thickening. "This peasant wouldn't recognize soul if it was plated in gold. Give him the coke, au vin." Simple enough for his unrefined palate. But as the night wore on, disaster struck. A crucial imported ingredient spoiled. The kitchen descended into controlled chaos. Daniel screaming, his face purple. In the pandemonium, Andrew Gates's order was forgotten. Peter burst into the kitchen, pale with panic. "Table 1 is getting impatient. Mr. Gates is asking for his entree." "What's the status?" "It will be ready when it's ready," Daniel snapped. In that moment, Kate saw it. Tucked in the back pantry was a container of her own dark roux, made at home for the staff meal. In the walk-in cooler, she knew there was venison and root vegetables from yesterday's prep. All the components were there. The ingredients for her grandmother's Blue Ridge stew, Joanna's masterpiece. Mr. Gates wanted soul. She held generations of soul in her memory. It was reckless, insane, a violation of every rule. But thinking of David, of the bills, of Gates's dismissive gesture and Daniel's cruelty, Kate made a decision that would change everything. While chaos swirled around her, she slipped into a forgotten corner station and began to cook. She was no longer a waitress. She was Joanna Thompson's granddaughter, and she was about to serve destiny on a plate. The corner where Kate worked became sacred ground. The clatter of pans, the hiss of grills, Daniel's furious tirades, all faded into background noise. Here, there was only the familiar ritual, the dance she'd learned at her grandmother's elbow in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She started with the holy trinity of Appalachian cooking: diced onions, celery, and carrots hitting hot oil with a sizzle that sang to her soul. She sautéed them until soft and golden, building the foundation. This was Joanna's Blue Ridge stew, a recipe never written down in full until Kate transcribed it herself. A dish her grandmother made only for healing, for homecomings, for moments when souls needed mending. Kate's soul needed mending now. Every chop of her knife, every stir of the spoon was an act of defiance, a reclamation of the part of herself Vantage tried to erase daily. She added her dark roux, stirring it into the vegetables until it melted into a rich, earthy base. Then came the venison, seared until browned, releasing its deep, gamey essence. She poured in rich beef stock slowly, whisking until the mixture became a velvety canvas. The spices came next, not measured, but poured by feel, by memory passed down through generations. Mountain herbs, a touch of juniper, dried mushroom powder for umami depth. Then the secret ingredients, the touches that made this Joanna's recipe and no one else's. Wild mountain rosemary she'd harvested herself on a trip home, and the final, most crucial element, a drizzle of smoked honey, dark and complex, infused with hickory essence. Her grandmother swore it was the key, the element that woke everything up. She let it simmer, the flavors melding into complex harmony. The aroma, earthy, warm, deeply primal, began filling the kitchen, alien to Vantage's usual sterile sense of truffle oil and microgreens. A few line cooks paused, drawn by the smell. Their expressions mixed confusion with intrigue. "Thompson, what are you doing?" whispered Leo, a young cook, his eyes wide. "If Daniel sees you, cover for me." Kate whispered back, never leaving her pot. "Please." Leo hesitated, then nodded and positioned himself to screen her from view. Kate added tender root vegetables, parsnips, turnips, fingerling potatoes in the final minutes. She ladled the finished stew into a rustic ceramic bowl, topping it with a sprinkle of fresh parsley and a small sprig of that wild rosemary. It wasn't just food. It was her grandmother's laughter, the warmth of a mountain kitchen, the story of resilience and love told in every spoonful. It was everything this cold, Gilded Restaurant was not. Her heart pounded as she caught a junior server's eye. With an authority she'd never used before, she said, "Table 1. Now." The server, too intimidated to question her, carefully carried the bowl into the dining room. Kate leaned against the cool steel counter, her legs suddenly weak. She'd just committed culinary treason. She'd sent a piece of her soul to a man who demanded it, never knowing what he was truly asking for. Now all she could do was wait for salvation or ruin. The dining room operated on unspoken rules: muted conversations, restrained emotions, impeccable decorum. The arrival of Kate's stew at table 1 shattered every rule. First came the aroma, as the bowl was placed before Andrew Gates. A warm, complex scent, smoky, earthy, with hints of wild herbs and honey, wafted through the air, utterly foreign to Vantage's clinical atmosphere. Heads at nearby tables turned. Andrew looked down at the bowl with a frown. This wasn't the artful, pretentious plating he expected. It was simple, honest, almost rustic, something from a home kitchen, not a Michelin-starred establishment. His associates exchanged uncertain glances. "What is this?" Andrew asked, his voice sharp. The server stammered. The chef special, sir. For you." Andrew picked up a spoon, cynicism curling his lip. He was ready to dismiss it, to summon Peter and eviscerate the chef for this insolence. He dipped the spoon into the dark, rich broth, collecting a piece of venison and vegetables. He lifted it to his lips, his expression one of bored disdain. Then everything changed. The moment the stew touched his tongue, Andrew's face went slack. The cynical sneer vanished, replaced by profound shock. His eyes, usually cold and piercing, widened and seemed to look at something far beyond the restaurant walls. His hand trembled slightly. Julian, one of his associates, asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Andrew didn't answer. He couldn't. He was no longer on the 95th floor. He was a small boy, maybe 7 years old, sitting in a warm, sunlit kitchen in their family's North Carolina summer house. A woman with gentle eyes and soft laughter was humming a tune he hadn't heard in 3 decades. She was spooning something dark and wonderful from a cast-iron pot into his favorite blue bowl. It was the clearest memory he had of his mother before she died. The taste was identical. The earthy depth, the gentle sweetness of smoked honey, the wild mountain rosemary that made everything bloom. It was a flavor he thought existed only in the locked chambers of his grief. He took another spoonful, then another. It wasn't food, it was archaeology. Each bite unearthed fossils of buried memory. His mother's smile, the feel of her hand on his head, the sound of her voice. Emotions he'd walled away for decades. Grief, love, aching loss surged through him, threatening to breach the fortress he'd built around his heart. A single tear escaped and traced down his face. He wiped it away angrily, embarrassed. The entire dining room held its breath. Andrew Gates, the ruthless titan, sat perfectly still, his spoon hovering over the bowl, his face a mask of stunned vulnerability. He pushed the bowl away, gently, his appetite gone, replaced by desperate, urgent need. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Peter, who was already hurrying over, anxiety written across his face. "Sir, is the dish not to your liking?" Peter asked, voice trembling. Andrew looked him straight in the eye. The commanding fire was back, but now fueled by something different. Not arrogance, but raw, desperate hope. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the hushed room like thunder. "Who made this?" In the kitchen, Kate heard the echo of that question from a server rushing past. Her blood ran cold. The tone wasn't pleasure. It sounded like an accusation. She braced herself for the inevitable. Peter storming in, Daniel pointing his finger, the words "you're fired" sealing her fate. But before anyone could reach her, Chef Daniel heard it too. He saw Peter's panicked expression through the service window, saw the stunned faces of other diners, and he smelled opportunity. The aroma of Kate's stew, which had annoyed him earlier, now smelled like success. A man like Andrew Gates didn't react that way to something he disliked. That was the look of someone deeply, profoundly moved. Pride and ambition surged through Daniel. He smoothed his pristine white jacket, a predatory gleam in his eyes. This was his kitchen, his Michelin star. Any miracle from it belonged to him. Before Peter could respond, Daniel strode into the dining room like a conquering hero, theatrical humility radiating from every pore. He arrived at table 1 and gave a slight deferential bow. "Mr. Gates," he began, his accent a finely tuned instrument of authority. "I am Chef Daniel Alberto. I am delighted my experiment pleased you." Kate, peering through the kitchen's circular window, felt her stomach drop. His experiment? Andrew's gaze was intense, analytical. "You made this?" "But of course," Daniel said with a flourish. "It is a dish I have been developing for some time. A modern interpretation of an old mountain classic. I call it Montagne Eternelle, Eternal Mountain." He improvised brilliantly, weaving culinary jargon into a masterpiece of lies. The roux is aged for 48 hours in a temperature-controlled environment. The honey is cold smoked over applewood. It is a very delicate, technical process. Kate watched, fury burning away her fear. He was stealing Joanna's legacy, repackaging her grandmother's soul as his pretentious creation. He'd called her wallpaper, treated her as invisible. Now he was stealing the one thing that made her truly visible. Andrew listened, his expression unreadable. "An old mountain classic," he repeated softly. "From where exactly? What's its story?" Daniel's smile didn't falter. "It is my homage to Appalachian tradition. The story is one of innovation, taking the humble and elevating it to the sublime. That is my philosophy." Andrew nodded slowly, though doubt flickered in his eyes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black business card, sliding it across the table. "I'm opening a flagship hotel in New York with a signature restaurant," Andrew said, his voice returning to businesslike precision. "I'm looking for an executive chef with vision, someone who can create food like this. We should talk." The offer hung in the air, worth millions, career-defining. Daniel's eyes widened, his composure cracking to reveal naked ambition. He took the card with a trembling hand. "I would be honored, Mr. Gates." Kate watched the exchange, her heart shattering. He wasn't just stealing her dish. He was building an empire on it. Her future. The future that could give David the life he deserved. All handed to a fraud. Fear evaporated. The invisible waitress was gone. All that remained was Joanna Thompson's granddaughter. She pushed open the kitchen door and walked toward table 1. The wallpaper was about to speak. Every step Kate took across Vantage's plush carpet felt infinite. The hushed conversations, the clinking glasses, it all faded. Her focus was laser-sharp. The smug triumph on Daniel's face and the searching intensity in Andrew Gates's eyes. Peter moved to intercept her, hands raised in panic. "Kate, what are you doing? Go back." She walked past him as if he were air. Her gaze never left Andrew Gates. She stopped at the table's edge, hands clasped behind her back to hide their shaking. She was just a waitress in a blue uniform, but she stood like a queen. The 3 men looked up. Andrew's associates appeared annoyed. Daniel's face darkened with fury. Andrew, however, simply watched her with intense curiosity. He'd seen the fire in her eyes. "Excuse me," Kate said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. "There's been a misunderstanding." Daniel stepped forward, inserting himself between Kate and Andrew. "This is a staff matter, Mr. Gates. My apologies. She's just a waitress." Clearly overwhelmed. "A waitress who knows you're lying," Kate said, her voice rising with conviction. She looked past Daniel directly at Andrew. "He didn't make that dish, sir. I did." A collective gasp rippled through nearby tables. Daniel laughed, a short, ugly bark. "This is absurd. She's delusional." Andrew remained silent, his gaze shifting between the theatrical chef and the resolute waitress. He was a man who'd built an empire reading people, spotting deception, sensing weakness. He looked at Daniel's indignation, then at Kate's unshakable certainty. "Is that so?" Andrew said, his voice dangerously soft. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. He wasn't addressing Daniel. He spoke only to Kate. "If you made it, tell me about it. Tell me about your eternal mountain." He used Daniel's pretentious name with faint irony. Kate took a deep breath. "It's not called Eternal Mountain. It's called Blue Ridge Stew. And it doesn't have a philosophy. It has a history." Daniel tried to interrupt. "This is preposterous." "Let her speak," Andrew commanded, his voice steel-sharp. Daniel fell silent, his face flushed with anger and fear. "The roux isn't aged in a special room," Kate continued, strength building in her voice. "It's made in a cast-iron skillet, stirred with a wooden spoon for nearly an hour until it's deep mahogany and smells like toasted nuts. The honey isn't cold-smoked over applewood. It's hickory smoked by a small producer in Asheville who's been doing it the same way for 40 years. And the real depth doesn't come from modern technique. It comes from wild mountain rosemary, hand-harvested from the high ridges, and root vegetables that grow in rocky soil. They taste different than anything you can buy." She was reciting not a recipe, but a sacred text. Each detail painted authenticity Daniel's lies couldn't match. Andrew's face was a mask of concentration, hanging on every word. Kate looked him directly in the eye, her voice dropping to something more intimate. "And there's one last thing, a secret, something only the person who made it would know, a final ingredient that doesn't belong in traditional mountain cooking, but my grandmother swore by it. She said it was the key. She said it woke everything up." Andrew leaned forward, hands flat on the table, color draining from his face. The air crackled. He knew. "What ingredient?" he whispered. Daniel looked between them, dawning horror on his face. This was no longer about a job offer. This was a trial, and he was the accused. Kate held Andrew's gaze. "Smoked honey," she said softly. A dark drizzle of hickory smoked honey stirred in at the very end. The word struck Andrew like a physical blow. He slumped back in his chair, mind reeling. It was true. He remembered his mother in their mountain house kitchen, drizzling something dark and amber from a small jar, telling him with a conspiratorial smile, "This is our secret, Andrew. It wakes everything up." It was a detail so specific, so deeply buried in memory, that hearing it spoken aloud felt supernatural. He knew with absolute certainty. The man before him was a liar, and the waitress was the keeper of truth he thought he'd lost forever. He turned his icy gaze on the now sweating chef. The game was over. The silence following Kate's revelation was absolute, as if all oxygen had been sucked from the 95th floor. Chef Daniel stood frozen, his face ghastly pale. The web of lies he'd spun so effortlessly had been incinerated by 2 words: smoked honey. Andrew slowly lifted his gaze and fixed it on Daniel. There was no theatrical rage in his eyes, something far more terrifying, cold, quiet finality. The look he gave rivals before crushing them. "Get out," Andrew said. The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of execution. "Leave this restaurant. I'll speak with the owners in the morning. I suggest you find a new profession." Daniel stammered. Mr. Gates, I can explain. There was confusion in the kitchen. I didn't ask for explanations. I told you to leave. Andrew's voice dropped even lower. He turned his head slightly. Peter, the manager, who'd been hovering nearby, looking faint, scurried over. Yes, Mr. Gates? This man's employment is terminated immediately. See him out. Peter nodded vigorously, taking Daniel's arm. The disgraced chef, stripped of pride and future, allowed himself to be led away. His white jacket suddenly looked like a shroud. The dining room buzzed with frantic whispers. Andrew's associates sat stunned. Andrew paid them no mind. His entire world had shrunk to the space occupied by the waitress before him. He turned his full attention to Kate, his expression no longer cold but raw and vulnerable, filled with desperate questions. How, he asked, voice raspy with emotion. How could you possibly know that? Kate's anger had subsided, replaced by vindication and something deeper. I told you, it wasn't my secret. It was my grandmother's. She taught me everything in her kitchen in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Blue Ridge stew was her masterpiece, the first thing she taught me and the last thing we cooked together before she passed. The mention of Blue Ridge Mountains sent another jolt through Andrew. Puzzle pieces from different worlds were flying together. Her name, Andrew said, his voice tight. Tell me your grandmother's name. Kate said it with love and reverence. Her name was Joanna Thompson. The name struck Andrew with physical force. He visibly recoiled. Joanna Thompson. It wasn't just a name. It was a key unlocking the furthest corner of his memory. He remembered his mother talking about a summer in North Carolina before she married his father, a brief period she'd always spoken of with unique fondness. She talked about volunteering at a community center, about a woman who ran the kitchen, a kind soul who took pity on her terrible cooking and taught her one perfect dish, a stew she'd make for Andrew every birthday until she died. My mother, Andrew began, his voice cracking. He stopped to compose himself. Before she married my father, she spent a summer in North Carolina. She was a terrible cook, burned everything. A faint, sad smile ghosted across his lips. But she told me about a woman at the community center, a brilliant cook who taught her one dish, one single perfect dish she'd make for me every year until she was gone. Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding. A wild, impossible idea was forming. Andrew looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. Her best friend that summer, he said, voice thick with 30 years of buried grief. The woman who taught her that recipe, her name was Joanna Thompson. The revelation settled over them, so profound, so impossibly intimate. It created its own pocket of silence. There was only a billionaire haunted by his past and a waitress who embodied it. Kate felt her knees weaken. She steadied herself on a chair. Her grandmother had mentioned a friend, a sweet but clumsy young woman from up north named Eleanor, who had laughter like wind chimes and fierce determination to learn at least one thing to impress her family. Joanna had taught her the Blue Ridge stew, sharing it with only chosen few. Your mother, Kate whispered. Was her name Eleanor? Andrew nodded, astonishment on his face. Eleanor Gates. Before marriage, Eleanor Vance. It was true. Two families, two worlds, scattered memories, all converging in this impossible moment. Kate's grandmother and Andrew's mother had shared friendship, a kitchen, a secret recipe. That recipe had become a lifeline of memory for a grieving son and a legacy of love for a devoted granddaughter. The dish wasn't just a meal. It was a bridge spanning decades of loss, connecting them right now. My grandmother spoke of her, Kate said, her eyes misty. She said Eleanor was the only person who could burn water, but had the kindest heart. She sent my grandmother postcards every year, always from elegant places. They were signed, "With love, your friend Eleanor." Andrew ran a hand over his face, the weight crushing down. My mother passed when I was 10. My father wasn't sentimental. He packed away her things, letters, photos. He wanted to move on, thought he was protecting me, but he was erasing her. That taste was the only thing I had left, the only thing he couldn't take away. He looked at Kate, and she didn't see a billionaire. She saw that 7-year-old boy who'd lost his mother and the flavor of his childhood all at once. "I've spent years trying to find it," Andrew continued. "I hired the best chefs in the world to replicate it. No one came close." "They couldn't," Kate said softly. "They were missing the most important ingredient." "The smoked honey?" Kate shook her head. "The story. They were following instructions. But you have to cook it with love. That's what my grandmother always said." The emotion was overwhelming. Andrew's associates quietly excused themselves. Andrew gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please, sit." Kate sank into the leather chair, her apron completely out of place. "All this time," Andrew mused, looking at the city lights but seeing something else. "All my life chasing success, building an empire. I thought that dish was about flavor, about memory. But it's more. It's connection. It's legacy." He turned his intense gaze back to her. "Your grandmother gave my mother a gift she passed me, and you just gave it back. You have no idea what you've done." Kate could only nod, tears freely flowing. "This isn't how your story should be told," Andrew said, new energy entering his voice. Clarity and decisiveness returned, the qualities that made him a titan. "Hiding in kitchens like this, a gift like yours, a legacy like Joanna Thompson's. It deserves a cathedral." The months that followed were a whirlwind of transformation. The first thing Kate did with Andrew's generous advance was secure treatment for David at Chicago's best facility. For the first time, there was a clear path not just to stability, but to recovery. Andrew and Kate became partners. He secured the perfect building, and they began construction on Joanna's hearth, not a sterile monument to ego, but a warm refuge celebrating heritage and healing. Kate curated the menu from her grandmother's book, each dish carrying a story. She hired her own team, starting with Leo from Vantage as her sous chef, selecting people who understood that cooking was an act of love. Andrew underwent his own transformation. One afternoon, Kate found him awkwardly holding one of Joanna's cast iron skillets. "She cooked in this?" he asked in awe. "Every single day," Kate smiled. "Want a lesson?" She spent the next hour teaching him to make a proper roux. He was clumsy, splattering his expensive clothes, but completely absorbed, a look of peaceful concentration she'd never seen. In that moment, sharing laughter over clouds of flour. They weren't billionaire and chef. They were two people honoring a shared past. Opening night at Joanna's hearth was everything they dreamed. The room was alive, a vibrant tapestry of people from every walk of life. A small folk band played softly in the corner. David, looking healthier and happier than he had in years, stood at the host stand, his smile a beacon. Kate, in a crisp white chef's coat with Joanna's hearth embroidered over her heart, moved through the room. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was sharing her story. Late that evening, she found Andrew by the bar, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. He held a small bowl of the Blue Ridge stew. "She would have loved this," he said, voice husky. "My mother. She always wanted a place like this, full of life." "Grandmother Joanna would have been so proud," Kate said, looking at the joyful room, at David, at the incredible life that had bloomed from one reckless act of defiance. "I think they both are." It wasn't just a restaurant. It was testament to the fact that our real legacy isn't money. It's the love we share and the memories we nourish. The wallpaper hadn't just found her voice. She'd built a beautiful, thriving home for it, a place where memory, heritage, and healing came together, where two families, separated by decades and circumstance, were finally reunited through the power of a grandmother's love and a simple, perfect stew. If you enjoyed this story, we'd appreciate it if you rated it from 1 to 10. Support us with a like and subscribe to our channel, Twister Stories. Comment from what place you're watching us. Thanks for your unconditional support in every story. Blessings to you and your family.